leaving the horizon damaged but victorious. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the bridge erupted into cheers as the crew realized they had survived. Harper leaned back in his chair, exhausted but relieved, meeting Serena's gaze. "We wouldn't have made it without you." Serena, still composed despite the ordeal, gave a small smile. "And I wouldn't be alive without you and your crew." In the aftermath of the battle, the full truth emerged. The sabotage had indeed been orchestrated by a faction within the Thalnara Empire. Powerful elites who saw humanity as a threat to their dominance and feared any alliance that might elevate them on the galactic stage. Their plan had been to ensure that the princess never returned from her mission, using her death as a pretext to discredit humans entirely. But thanks to the resourcefulness of Harper and his crew, the plot had failed. As the horizon limped toward its final destination, Serena made it clear that she would not let this betrayal go unanswered. Upon their arrival, she would reveal the treachery within her empire and publicly exonerate humanity of any wrongdoing. In the days that followed, Serena formally addressed the Galactic Council. Standing before the assembled leaders of the galaxy, she praised humanity's courage and ingenuity, declaring that they possessed something no other species did: an indomitable will to survive against all odds. She spoke of how the human crew had risked their lives to protect hers, not out of obligation, but because it was who they were. "The humans may not have our technology," she said, her voice carrying across the council chamber, "but they have something far more valuable: adaptability, creativity, and the courage to face challenges head-on. I believe we have much to learn from them." Her words reverberated through the halls of power. Where humanity had once been seen as a lesser species, they were now regarded with newfound respect. Serena's endorsement marked a turning point in human galactic relations, paving the way for future alliances and cooperation. The Grand Hall of the Intergalactic Summit was a marvel of engineering, vast and gleaming, filled with towering figures from all corners of the galaxy. Humans were small in number here, outmatched by the representatives of more advanced civilizations, who were draped in shimmering robes and speaking in complex dialects. At the edge of the gathering, the human delegation stood, feeling like awkward guests at a party where they didn't quite belong. Captain Elias Harper tugged at the stiff collar of his uniform, scanning the room. He'd been briefed on this summit for weeks. Trade agreements, defense treaties, the usual. Humanity's presence here was more symbolic than influential. They were tolerated, not respected, their ships and technology still decades behind the likes of the Thalnara or the Zelvians. Yet here they stood, heads held high despite the whispered dismissals and sidelong glances from other delegations. "What are we even doing here?" muttered Lieutenant Riley, Harper's second-in-command. "They see us like kids playing with sticks while they're holding laser rifles." Harper shrugged, keeping his voice low. "One step at a time. We've made it this far. That counts for something." A murmur rippled through the room, interrupting their conversation. The doors at the far end slid open, and in walked the Thalnara delegation, tall, graceful, and unmistakably regal. Leading them was Princess Serena, the heir to the Thalnara Empire, known for her beauty and her icy demeanor. She was surrounded by guards, their ceremonial armor reflecting the brilliance of the room. "What's she doing here?" Riley whispered. Harper frowned. The princess wasn't expected at a simple diplomatic meeting. Her presence could only mean something significant, something that might change the course of the talks. Serena's gaze swept across the hall as she walked with practiced elegance, her chin held high. She was used to command, used to obedience. When she stopped at the center of the hall, the room fell silent, and all eyes were on her. "I will not travel on one of our ships," she announced, her voice clear and unwavering. The statement caused an immediate stir. Harper exchanged a confused glance with Riley. Why would the princess refuse to use the finest ships in the galaxy? "I demand," she continued, "to travel aboard a human vessel." The silence broke into chaos. Representatives from various species erupted in murmurs, whispers of shock and disbelief. The Thalnara delegation looked scandalized. Harper blinked, trying to process what he'd just heard. His first instinct was that he must have misheard. A human vessel? The princess? Their ships were serviceable, but compared to the Thalnara's, there was no comparison. It was like asking to travel in a rowboat instead of a luxury cruiser. The Thalnara delegation leader, a stern-faced elder, stepped forward, visibly displeased. Your Highness, this is highly irregular. Our ships are the safest, most advanced in the galaxy. To travel on a human vessel is dangerous. Serena's eyes narrowed. I did not ask for your opinion. My decision is final. Captain Harper stiffened. The human delegation was being drawn into this unexpectedly, and he knew they couldn't afford to refuse. Still, the demand was beyond anything they could have predicted. As the murmurs grew louder, Harper stepped forward. Your Highness, Harper began carefully, I'm not sure what has prompted this request, but we're honored you would trust us with your safety. However, our ships— Serena interrupted him, her gaze cutting through the air like a knife. Captain, your humility is unnecessary. I am well aware of what I am requesting. Harper swallowed. He knew better than to argue with royalty. If that's your wish, we'll prepare our best ship immediately. The tension in the room escalated. The Thalnara delegation looked ready to explode, and even the human representatives shifted uneasily. This wasn't just an odd request, it was a political statement. By choosing a human ship, Serena was elevating humanity in front of the entire Galactic Council. Whether she intended it or not, this act would have far-reaching consequences. Captain, said the Thalnara leader, his voice cold with restrained anger, do you understand the gravity of this situation? If anything happens to the princess while aboard your vessel, it will not go unnoticed. It was an unspoken threat. Harper nodded calmly. I understand. Serena turned her back to the Thalnara elders, her posture regal and unyielding. Prepare the human ship, we leave tomorrow. Harper nodded again, and with that, the princess swept out of the room, her guards trailing behind her like shadows. The room buzzed with speculation and tension. The Thalnara elders exchanged sharp whispers, clearly displeased, but unable to counter their princess's demand. Harper's mind raced with the weight of the responsibility that had just been placed on his shoulders. Riley leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. What the hell just happened? Harper exhaled slowly. We're about to find out. The summit adjourned with little fanfare, as most discussions were drowned out by the shocking turn of events. Humanity, long regarded as the underdog species of the galaxy, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Some of the more advanced species regarded them with open suspicion now. Why would the princess, heir to one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, choose a human ship over her own? The walk back to the human delegation's quarters felt heavier than usual. Harper could feel the weight of the entire summit pressing down on him. As soon as they entered their briefing room, the chatter began. Why us? Asked one of the junior officers. What's she trying to prove? Riley shook her head. It's a power play, has to be. She's showing up the Thalnara by making them look weak. What better way than by picking a human ship? Harper wasn't so sure. In the galaxy, to travel on a human vessel is dangerous. Serena's eyes narrowed. I did not ask for your opinion. My decision is final. Captain Harper stiffened. The human delegation was being drawn into this unexpectedly, and he knew they couldn't afford to refuse. Still, the demand was beyond anything they could have predicted. As the murmurs grew louder, Harper stepped forward. Your Highness, Harper began carefully, I'm not sure what has prompted this request, but we're honored you would trust us with your safety. However, our ships— Serena interrupted him, her gaze cutting through the air like a knife. Captain, your humility is unnecessary. I am well aware of what I am requesting. Harper swallowed. He knew better than to argue with royalty. If that's your wish, we'll prepare our best ship immediately. The tension in the room escalated. The Thalnara delegation looked ready to explode, and even the human representatives shifted uneasily. This wasn't just an odd request. It was a political statement. By choosing a human ship, Serena was elevating humanity in front of the entire Galactic Council. Whether she intended it or not, this act would have far-reaching consequences. Captain, said the Thalnara leader, his voice cold with restrained anger, do you understand the gravity of this situation? If anything happens to the princess while aboard your vessel, it will not go unnoticed. It was an unspoken threat. Harper nodded calmly. I understand. Serena turned her back to the Thalnara elders, her posture regal and unyielding. Prepare the human ship. We leave tomorrow. Harper nodded again, and with that, the princess swept out of the room, her guards trailing behind her like shadows. The room buzzed with speculation and tension. The Thalnara elders exchanged sharp whispers, clearly displeased, but unable to counter their princess's demand. Harper's mind raced with the weight of the responsibility that had just been placed on his shoulders. Riley leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "What the hell just happened?" Harper exhaled slowly. "We're about to find out." The summit adjourned with little fanfare, as most discussions were drowned out by the shocking turn of events. Humanity, long regarded as the underdog species of the galaxy, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Some of the more advanced species regarded them with open suspicion now. Why would the princess, heir to one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, choose a human ship over her own? The walk back to the human delegation's quarters felt heavier than usual. Harper could feel the weight of the entire summit pressing down on him. As soon as they entered their briefing room, the chatter began. "Why us?" asked one of the junior officers. "What's she trying to prove?" Riley shook her head. "It's a power play, has to be. She's showing up the Thalnara by making them look weak. What better way than by picking a human ship?" Harper wasn't so sure. The princess hadn't seemed like she was playing games. There was something deeper going on, but he couldn't yet see the full picture. What he did know was that they were on a razor's edge now. The entire galaxy would be watching their every move, and any mistake could spell disaster. Not just for him and his crew, but for humanity's fragile place in the galactic community. "We don't have a choice," Harper said finally. "We prepare the ship. Whatever happens next, we need to make sure we're ready." The human delegation dispersed, tension still hanging in the air. As Harper sat alone in the dimly lit room, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about a simple diplomatic mission. There was more at play, something far larger than he or any of his crew could understand. And with Princess Serena's life now in their hands, failure was not an option. The Horizon sat in the docking bay, a weathered warship that had seen better days. Its hull, once gleaming with newness, now bore the scars of countless skirmishes. Despite its age, the ship was a testament to human resilience, battered, but still functional. Captain Elias Harper stood on the bridge, staring out at the ship's exterior through the viewport, arms crossed. This was the ship they'd be entrusting with an alien princess's life. It wasn't pretty, but it was theirs. "This ship's older than I am," Lieutenant Riley remarked, standing beside him, her tone half joking, half concerned. "Are we sure she'll hold up with a princess on board? One wrong move, and we'll be the ones catching the heat." Harper smirked, though the weight of the responsibility wasn't lost on him. "She's held up against worse. Besides, it's not the ship, it's the crew that'll get us through this." And the crew would be the key. Each member had been handpicked for their ability to make do with what little they had. They didn't have the sleek technology or the flawless ships of the other species, but what they did have was creativity, adaptability, and grit. Harper knew his people, and he knew they'd rise to the challenge, even if the stakes were impossibly high this time. In the ship's belly, Chief Engineer Davis was already neck-deep in preparations. He was a genius when it came to squeezing every last ounce of performance out of the Horizon's aging systems. Right now, he had 3 different panels open, sparks flying as he rerouted circuits and bypassed damaged relays. Davis was in his element, though his expression was one of concern. "Cap, I gotta be honest," Davis said, glancing up as Harper entered the engine room. "This ship's held together with spit and prayer. We're patching her up as best we can, but with royalty on board, one thing goes wrong and, well, let's just say the Thalnara won't be sending flowers." Harper nodded. "I don't expect perfection. Just make sure she holds together for the trip. We'll worry about the rest as it comes." The crew buzzed with activity, each member focused on their task. The news of Princess Serena's demands had thrown them all into overdrive. They were used to operating in tough conditions, but hosting an alien princess from one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy? That was a whole different level of pressure. They knew that every move they made would be scrutinized, not just by their own people, but by an entire galaxy that was waiting for them to fail. The day before departure, Serena arrived to inspect the ship. Flanked by her personal guards, tall, silent, and visibly unimpressed with the surroundings, she boarded the Horizon for the first time. Harper stood at attention, his crew behind him, waiting for her reaction. Serena's eyes swept over the ship's interior, taking in the utilitarian design, the exposed wires, the well-worn metal floors. There was no luxury here, no grand display of power. It was a working ship, built for war and survival, not for comfort. And yet, she showed no visible displeasure. Instead, she seemed intrigued. "This ship is nothing like ours," she said, her voice even, but with a touch of curiosity. "I've heard humans favor function over aesthetics." Harper nodded. "We focus on what works. Looks don't win battles." Serena's gaze lingered on a few of the more patched-together components, the signs of rushed repairs and jury-rigged systems. And yet, it still functions. Remarkable. Her guards, on the other hand, were less reserved. One of them scoffed openly, muttering something in their native tongue, something that Harper guessed wasn't exactly flattering. Tension flickered through the room, subtle but unmistakable. The Thalnara were used to their sleek, polished ships, and to them, the Horizon must have looked like a relic from another age. Riley stepped forward, her posture straight. "We may not have the same tech, but this ship's gotten us through more than a few tight spots." Serena met her eyes, and for a moment, Harper thought there was something close to respect in the princess's expression. "That, Lieutenant, is precisely why I chose to travel with you." Harper didn't press for more information, though the curiosity gnawed at him. Why had she insisted on a human ship? What did she see in them that her own people didn't? Whatever her reasons, they had to prove themselves worthy of her trust. They had no other choice. As the princess and her guards moved through the ship, inspecting the rest of the crew and facilities, the humans couldn't help but feel the weight of her expectations, and the expectations of the entire galaxy. They could feel the eyes of the alien dignitaries watching from afar, waiting for something to go wrong, waiting for humanity to stumble. But Harper knew his crew wouldn't let that happen. Not today. Later that evening, as the crew wrapped up their final preparations, Davis leaned back against the engine room wall, wiping sweat from his brow. "You know, Cap, there's something strange about all this. She could have picked any ship, any crew, and the galaxy. Why us?" Harper didn't have an answer. But he knew that whatever Serena's motives, they couldn't afford to question them too deeply right now. The mission was all that mattered, and keeping her safe meant keeping humanity's fragile standing intact. By the time the Horizon was fully prepped, the entire crew was on edge, but ready. The ship's systems were as upgraded as they could be, and the crew had drilled endlessly to ensure there wouldn't be any surprises. The pride they took in their ship was palpable, despite its flaws. They knew it wasn't the best the galaxy had to offer, but it was theirs, and it had carried them through countless battles and challenges. As they prepared to depart, Harper stood on the bridge, watching the stars. The galaxy was watching them now, and they couldn't afford to fail. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it with the same resilience that had brought humanity this far. The Horizon may have been old and battle-worn, but it still had one more mission left in her. The journey began smoothly enough. The Horizon, despite its age and patched-up systems, moved steadily through the void of space. Princess Serena, for all her regal demeanor, seemed genuinely intrigued by the ship's operations. She spent much of her time observing the crew in action, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. Harper noticed how she watched, not with disdain, but with growing respect for their resourcefulness. On the second day, Serena found herself on the bridge during a routine navigation check. Lieutenant Riley was calmly directing a course correction, her fingers flying across the control panel, while Harper stood nearby, overseeing the process. The systems, though not as advanced as what Serena was used to, operated with surprising efficiency. "You make the most of what you have," Serena said, breaking the silence. Her voice carried no hint of condescension, just quiet observation. Harper glanced at her. "We have to. It's that, or not make it at all." Serena considered this for a moment, then nodded. "In the Thalnara Empire, everything is given to us. Our technology, our systems, they're flawless. But I sometimes wonder if we've lost something by always having it easy." Harper raised an eyebrow. "Lost what?" She paused, then spoke carefully. "We've lost the ability to struggle, to fight for survival." It's interesting to see how humans thrive despite the odds. Harper leaned back in his chair, weighing her words. It was a rare admission from someone as high up in the galactic hierarchy as Serena, and it gave him a glimpse into why she might have insisted on this journey. "We've had to innovate because we didn't have a choice," he said. "When you're up against the wall, you figure out ways to get through, or you don't make it." Their conversation was cut short by a sudden flicker of the lights. The ship gave a slight shudder, and alarms briefly flashed on several control panels. Chief Engineer Davis's voice came over the comms, a note of concern in his tone. "Captain, we've got a minor power fluctuation down here. I'm looking into it." Harper nodded at Riley to maintain course and keyed in a response. "Keep me posted." Serena didn't react outwardly, but Harper caught a flicker of something in her expression. Concern, maybe. It wasn't normal for the Horizon to have issues like this, not after all the work Davis and his team had put into preparing the ship. Harper made a mental note to look into it later. A few hours passed without incident, but the crew was on edge. Another flicker of power in the engine room raised suspicions. Davis had been running diagnostics all day, and his frustration was evident when Harper met him in the engineering bay. "This isn't just old systems acting up," Davis muttered, hands deep in a mess of wiring. "Something's not right. I think someone's been tampering with our power grid." Harper's jaw tightened. "You think it's sabotage?" Davis gave him a grim look. "Wouldn't be the first time. I've checked everything twice, and these malfunctions don't make sense. It's like someone's deliberately causing minor issues. Nothing major yet, but enough to mess with us." Harper's thoughts went immediately to Serena's guards. They had been cold and distant from the moment they boarded, never quite interacting with the crew, and always standing just a little too stiffly near Serena. They were there to protect her, yes, but Harper had seen their eyes track his crew with suspicion. Could they be behind this? He kept his suspicions to himself for now, but the growing sense of unease settled into the pit of his stomach. If it was sabotage, they were in more danger than they realized. The next day, the stakes rose further. As the Horizon cruised through a quiet sector of space, the ship's sensors picked up an anomaly, a distortion in the surrounding space that came out of nowhere. Riley immediately flagged it, her voice tense. "Captain, we've got something strange up ahead. It's not on any of the standard star charts." Before Harper could respond, the ship lurched violently. The distortion intensified, dragging them off course. It wasn't just a natural anomaly, it was something far worse. The alarms blared as the crew scrambled to regain control. Davis's voice crackled over the comms, shouting about systems overloading and engine strain. Serena was on the bridge, gripping the edge of a console to steady herself. Even her guards, usually stoic and emotionless, looked unnerved. Harper barked orders, directing the crew to reroute power and adjust their course. It was Riley's quick thinking that saved them. She manually recalibrated the ship's thrusters, compensating for the distortion's pull just long enough for the Horizon to break free. The ship groaned as it stabilized, and the crew collectively let out a breath they hadn't realized they were holding. "That wasn't just bad luck," Harper said grimly. He glanced at Serena, who was watching, eyeing him intently. "That was a trap." Serena's eyes narrowed. "Pirates?" "Or worse," Harper said. "Could be political rivals. Your empire has enemies, and some of them might not want you coming back alive." The princess's face tightened. She knew what he was implying, that someone from within her own empire might be involved. Her guards stiffened, exchanging glances, but said nothing. The tension in the air was palpable. The ship pressed on, but the crew was jumpy now. Davis reported more strange malfunctions, each more concerning than the last. Harper called a meeting with his senior officers in the briefing room to discuss the growing threat. "We're being hunted," Riley said bluntly. "Whoever's after us, they're not going to stop. They're waiting for the right moment. And someone's helping them," Davis added. "These malfunctions aren't random." Harper nodded, already forming a plan. "We need to be ready for anything. Get the crew on high alert. If there's a saboteur on board, we'll find them. And if those pirates come back, we'll be ready." Despite the rising danger, Serena remained composed, though Harper could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She wasn't used to this, living on the edge, where survival wasn't guaranteed by technology but by sheer will and ingenuity. Yet, as the journey continued, she began to see why humanity had managed to survive in a galaxy that often saw them as insignificant. She watched as the crew worked tirelessly, adapting to each new crisis with determination and creativity. The human way of doing things, improvising, adapting, and never giving up, was alien to her. But it resonated. There was something undeniably powerful in their ability to face impossible odds and come out on top. As the ship pressed deeper into space, the danger only grew. But so did the bond between Serena and the human crew. For the first time, she began to question her own people's methods. Maybe they were advanced, maybe they had the best technology, but they lacked something fundamental. Something that humans, despite all their flaws, had in abundance. And as Serena stood on the bridge watching the stars blur past, she knew one thing for certain. Her survival now depended on these humans and the very ship she had chosen. As the horizon neared its destination, there was a palpable sense of relief among the crew. They had weathered the sabotage, dodged deadly traps, and fended off attacks. Harper stood on the bridge, his eyes scanning the starfield ahead, aware that their mission wasn't over yet. He'd learned to trust his instincts, and something still felt off. Just then, the ship's sensors flared with a proximity alert. Riley's voice cut through the quiet, sharp, and urgent. "Captain, multiple ships inbound, fast." Before anyone could react, the horizon was jolted by a barrage of laser fire. The shields strained against the sudden onslaught, alarms blaring across the ship. Harper barked orders, the crew springing into action, but T was clear this wasn't just another pirate raid. These ships were military-grade, and they were targeting the horizon with precision. "They're Thalnara ships," Serena said quietly, standing near Harper on the bridge, her face grim. "Not pirates. This is a coordinated attack." Harper's stomach twisted. "Why would your own people be attacking us?" Serena's expression darkened. "Not my people, a faction within the Empire. They must be opposed to my diplomatic mission. They want to sabotage any alliance with humanity and frame you for my death." Riley cursed under her breath, fingers flying over the controls to maneuver the ship away from the incoming fire. So this was the plan all along. Make it look like we're responsible for killing her. Harper's mind raced, but there was no time for panic. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but that had never stopped them before. "We're not going down without a fight. Davis, divert all power to shields and engines. Riley, get us out of here. Anywhere but here." The ship shook as another volley of fire struck their shields. Harper could see the strain on his crew's faces, the weight of the situation sinking in. They were on the edge of destruction, and every second counted. Serena stepped forward, her voice steady despite the chaos. "There's a way. I know the weaknesses in those ships. If you trust me, I can help you outmaneuver them." Harper didn't hesitate. "We're all in this together. What do we need to do?" Serena moved swiftly to a nearby console, her fingers dancing over the controls as she accessed the ship's systems. She explained that the Thalnara ships, while technologically superior, had a predictable vulnerability in their power distribution, something her people rarely considered exploiting because they didn't expect such attacks from their own. As the battle intensified, the human crew adapted to Serena's insights, using every trick and unconventional strategy at their disposal. Riley piloted the horizon with reckless precision, darting through debris and outmaneuvering the Thalnara ships. Harper coordinated the crew's defense, directing firepower toward the weak points Serena had identified. Davis rerouted power with a level of ingenuity only a human engineer could muster, squeezing every ounce of energy from their strained systems. The horizon, though battered, fought back. What they lacked in firepower, they made up for in unpredictability. The enemy ships, accustomed to more conventional tactics, struggled to anticipate the humans' next moves. Then came the final standoff. One of the Thalnara ships had maneuvered too close, its shields flickering. Serena saw the opening and shouted, "Now, Captain, target their engines." Harper gave the order, and a volley of missiles struck the ship's exposed engines. The Thalnara vessel lurched violently, its systems overloaded, and it drifted aimlessly. The remaining ships, realizing their vulnerability, retreated into the blackness of space.